So welcome everybody. This is the latest in our Safeguarding in Schools webinar series. I'm Emma Geiringer. I'm the Safeguarding in Schools lead for Southwark. Today we are going to be hearing from Susie Lanyado and Caroline Carter from Groundwork's youth team with the latest webinar around supporting you to support young people. They'll tell you more about their team and the work of their team. I've just seen a message in the chat that Vicky, you can't hear. Can other people hear okay?
I can hear you, Emma, but I don't know about other people who are on the webinar.
If someone wouldn't mind taking themselves off mute or popping in the chat.
We can hear you. Sorry, my voice
I can hear you.
Yeah. Thanks, Mercedes. Oh dear, no, that doesn't sound.
No.
Hope you're well. Doesn't sound like you are.
Thank you for letting us know, Vicky. Sorry, it might be an issue with your sound. You might want to. Oh wait, if you can't hear us, then you won't be able to hear this. I'll drop you a message. If you do have any questions, please do feel free to use the chat. You can type those throughout, or I think there'll be time for questions at the end as well. So for now, I will pass over to Susie and Caroline.
Hi everyone, really nice to be here with you guys. We know quite a few of you already, and if you're listening on the kind of recording back, you might well know us already. So we're going to be doing a webinar around supporting you to support young people, a trauma-informed approach. Just to give you a bit of background of who we are. So we're Groundwork London, and we're across about 60 plus schools or community spaces across Southwark. So as you can see here, we're Education Wellbeing Team, which is going to be our new rebranded name from the Mental Health Support Team. And we're also School Engagement Team, where we're in another 30 plus schools. And overall, as I said, we're in the 60 plus schools. We work in lots of different ways within mental health and wellbeing in your schools as a service across the borough. And we will be becoming EWT. So when you see that come January, you'll know who we are. And there are our emails at the bottom there, so you can get in touch with us and ask any further questions or ask about further support. If you're not accessing that support from us, please do get in touch and we can discuss with you how best we can support going forward. So I am Susie, I hadn't said that first. This is my colleague Caroline. We're part of a wider, bigger team, so you might know the Nest as well. So Groundwork London, we run the Nest, which is the Mental Health and Wellbeing Hub in Peckham. We're a multidisciplinary team, education wellbeing practitioners, supervisors, teachers. I myself am from a teaching background. Senior leaders from education, youth workers, coaches and mentors. So we really are from a broad range of backgrounds. And we've got a broad range of experience and specialities and expertise that we wanted to so we're very aware of the kind of land, how it lies for you guys. And obviously we work quite closely with a lot of you as well. So that's just really introducing us.
So today we're going to be looking at a trauma-informed approach, so like looking after yourself and our young people. And some of the things we talk about may relate to you individually, your families and your school community. So with that in mind, kind of some of the content might be quite difficult for some of us. So please do take a break if you need to, put yourself on mute, take some time away from the camera, whatever kind of suits you. Today we're going to be looking at what a trauma-informed approach is. You might kind of be familiar with that as more schools become kind of trauma-informed places. Also emphasising the importance of you can't pour from an empty cup and kind of thinking about our window of tolerance. It's really important that we look after ourselves so that we can look after our young people, whether that's in school or at home. And also thinking about how we can identify when things aren't going well, including spotting signs of anxiety, low mood, thinking about those early warnings when things aren't going so well for us and our young people. And then we'll be looking at some practical strategies, how we can help, and then also kind of how we can help ourselves when we're struggling, and then offer some signposting at the end. So what is a trauma-informed approach? You kind of might have seen this symbol before, which is from Acorn Education, about connection, co-regulating and co-reflecting, which is the kind of 3 C's that underpin the trauma-informed practice approach. But we'll kind of talk you through what that kind of looks like, because not everyone might be familiar with it.
So we often use this model, and some of you might well be used to it. I think in schools we see a lot of the kind of behaviour which is on the top of the iceberg, where we see the shouting or the anger or the refusal to come to school or the tummy aches and the types of things that we can visibly see. But what we talk a lot about when we're talking about trauma-informed approach is trying to understand what those behaviours are about and what's actually below those behaviours, because what we may see on the surface may not be for the same reasons that they're experiencing underneath. It may be because they're tired, it may be because they're anxious, it could be that they're feeling a lot of shame around something that's happening in their lives. So there's what's going on inside that individual young person or people, and also staff members. We're thinking about the whole school community and also thinking about the context that sits within. So thinking about family dynamics, to be aware of those, how the peer group operates, societal pressures, available support to those families and young people, and life pressures, which we know are huge in this day and age. So it's really trying to think of that young person and ourselves as the whole person, not just the tip of the iceberg, and trying to move that question really from what's wrong with the person to what does this person need, and what do people need, and why are people behaving in certain ways, and how can we support them to feel better and to have better behaviours.
So what does kind of using a trauma-informed approach kind of look like? There may be some kind of young people and families that we work with where we know trauma has taken place. We might kind of know those families really well, or might kind of have been told things from our from a safeguarding perspective, but there might, and highly likely that we're working with children and young people who have experienced trauma that this hasn't been disclosed to us. So we're kind of approaching all these interactions as if trauma has occurred, and thinking about if trauma has occurred previously, kind of how might that have impacted them, and how can we promote trust and prevent re-traumatization by providing a kind of safe, stable environment and those trust adult and child relationships, especially within the school community, so that everyone can kind of flourish and work together effectively, because we don't always know what everyone's story might be. So trauma can look very different. We kind of define it by these three terms here. So acute is an isolated or single event, so it might be kind of an accident or injury, kind of a one-off occurrence, kind of being victim of a crime, natural disaster. Chronic, on the other hand, is kind of repeated exposure to a pattern event, so domestic abuse and violence, exposure to war and conflict, prolonged sexual abuse, something that's kind of happening again and again over a long period of time. And complex might be a combination of these, but kind of exposure to multiple varied traumatic events. So it might kind of involve some of these things we've said before, like emotional, physical abuse, neglect, but it might just be kind of lots of different things that happen throughout a person's life that's kind of led to that experience of trauma. And trauma will look kind of different for every single person, and kind of what an event that happens to two people kind of might have a completely different outcomes depending on kind of that support network and those coping mechanisms that person has. I don't know if you guys have heard of the term ACEs before, which stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. There was a study that was done back in between 95 to 97, which they had over 1,700 participants took part in, and they did lots of tests to kind of think about their childhood experience and how that impacted their current health. And the research studied the relationship between these 10 adverse childhood experiences listed on the screen and with future outcomes. So the things that they found that were linked to future outcomes and health was sexual abuse, physical abuse, having a family member with mental illness, verbal abuse, witnessing abuse of a family member, having a family member in prison, family member who misuses substances or alcohol, physical neglect, emotional neglect, or losing a parent or significant adult through divorce, separation, or death. And what the research found is that basically the more adverse childhood experiences a person had experienced, the more impact of them on the health outcomes later in life. So they were 2 to 3 times greater at risking heart disease and cancer if they experienced 4 or more ACEs, 10 to 12 times greater risk of drug use or attempted suicide, and 30 times more likely to develop a learning or behavioural problem if they experienced 4 or more of these kind of adverse childhood experiences that the study found.
And the study really is looking at the stress as a biological mechanism, and that how these have, huge effects on the child's brain and young people's brains and our own brains. So it may be that, everyone, we're talking about trauma-informed approaches for our whole school communities, but being aware of when we're working with children that they won't have had a chance to actually put these ideas and experiences together, and it's up to us as adults to help support them with that, and also be aware of what we might be bringing ourselves. And prolonged exposure to dangerously high levels of cortisol does have an impact on the brain capacity to learn. And I think that's the big thing when children or young people come into school and we're really struggling to help them access what they're trying to access. There might be multiple reasons, but one of those really could be traumatic events that they've experienced themselves that we may or may not know about. And so we need to be treating and working with our young people and ourselves as if those things may have happened, and how we can individually understand each young person and their families. And of course, children who are victims of trauma are more increased risk of academic failure. So our young people who are coming from war-torn countries, we have a lot of high immigration, lots of refugees in our borough. So really understanding how this may impact on that young person and how we can support them within classrooms. So trauma can also affect our ability to manage our emotions, which I'm sure some of us have seen as well in terms of how people react to things. And it does heighten our fight, flight, freeze response in our body, which means that that child could be, or people can be, in a constant state of high alert. So more prone to having those arguments or reacting in a way that we seem to feel is bigger than it actually is necessary, maybe having more physical fights, maybe running away, or avoiding communication altogether, because that trauma reaction is it means they're heightened inside them. And it can also affect their sleep patterns. And obviously, if we don't sleep properly, that then impacts on other things. So they can get in a real catch-22 situation. So trying to look at where we can support with breaking those cycles for young people and for ourselves when we start to get into these types of modes is really important.
So since that 1995 ACES study, there's been lots of changes kind of in science and research. And this video is from the Trauma Council as a really kind of lovely visual example of kind of how trauma can impact someone's interpretations or kind of social cues. So hopefully you should just be able to play and you'll be able to hear it. Fingers crossed.
Brain development is much more than a story about biology. From the earliest years, relationships with others play a key role in shaping how our brain grows and develops. Early relationships, where there is abuse and neglect, have a long-term impact on children. A brain that has adapted to survive in a threatening or unpredictable world may not work so well in an ordinary environment. This can create what is called latent vulnerability, where early abusive or neglectful experiences with carers put children at greater risk of experiencing mental health problems in the future. For these children, compared to their peers, common experiences like moving to a new school can feel more daunting and stressful. New faces can appear threatening, while positive social cues can be missed. It can be harder to negotiate new social situations and learn to trust new people. Even fun experiences like joining a new sports team can be challenging. Too much focus on potential threat cues can mean missing out on positive social cues such as a playful nudge. Or it causes an overreaction, which leads to an increased risk of conflict and sometimes violence. These reactions can increase the likelihood of generating new stressful events. It's harder to deal with everyday challenges when you feel unconfident and anxious inside, and harder to build and maintain relationships. Over time, this can mean a child loses friends and the support of adults, and so misses out on opportunities to grow and develop. This social thinning can increase the risk of mental health problems in the future. Neuroscience research is beginning to shed new light on how vulnerability unfolds over a child's life. All children need care and stimulation from adults who value them and who show them attention and love. These experiences shape a child's brain development. When children face traumatic experiences like abuse and neglect, their brain adapts to help them cope. We know of changes in 3 different brain systems: the reward, memory, and threat systems. Experiences of domestic violence or physical abuse can lead to hypervigilance, where the brain reacts more to threat. This might help a child stay safe in an early adverse environment, but it can cause problems in more ordinary environments. Hypervigilance can best be understood as a pattern of adaptation rather than a sign of damage. Abuse and neglect can also mean a world where a child's basic needs for care and attention are not met. This can shape the brain's reward system, the part of the brain that helps us learn about positive aspects of our environment and motivates our behaviour. Over time, the brain's reward system can learn to respond differently to things like positive social cues. Neuroscience studies have also pointed to changes in the autobiographical memory system, our memory of everyday past experiences. Following trauma, negative memories appear to become more salient, which means they become more prominent than positive ones. And everyday memories can also become less detailed. This is a problem because we need to draw on past experiences to help us deal with new social situations. Neuroscience research is showing how childhood trauma can create latent vulnerability, increasing the risk of later mental health problems like anxiety and depression. This vulnerability is not just located in the child, but arises through their relationships. Helping children who have experienced trauma still requires ordinary boundaries and consequences, but it also requires us to step back and reflect and see behaviour that we find challenging in a different light. A child may simply be doing their best to survive now, with brain adaptations from the past. We know a child's brain has the capacity to continue to adapt. For this to happen, they need our help to build and maintain trusted relationships, manage everyday stressors, and prevent new ones from happening. We need to encourage them to try again and believe things can be different. This is far from an easy task and takes time. Science is helping reframe our understanding of childhood trauma. Seeing children's behaviour in a new light can mean we respond differently. But there is much still to learn. Working together, we can develop more effective approaches that promote resilience and recovery. We can help children build trusting relationships and create opportunities for their brains to adapt in new ways.
Stopped.
I think that's a really poignant video, and I've seen it quite a few times, maybe many of you have as well, but I think it really helps support the idea of just understanding of what some of that behaviour when we're in school and we're struggling with time and energies to put in context what might be actually going on for that young person. And it's not necessarily something they are choosing to always do, that actually it's something that's within them that they're struggling with. It's the way their brain has kind of formed off the back of some pretty difficult situations. But I think it's really important to notice, as we've got here, the vulnerability to these things doesn't mean inevitability. That obviously positive childhood experience and protective factors can help mitigate the negative effects of these ACEs. Schools, you're such an important line of defence. I know myself from being in school that there are certain children, certain ways, certain families that can really be attracted to who you are and want to work with you. And those trusted adult relationships are so important. And that's what helps build that resilience and helps the children and young people feel safe where they are. And that by strengthening that is obviously the most important thing we can be doing in schools to support with that. So things like having one or more stable, caring adult-child relationship. And that's where our parents need our support with that as well. Helping them be equipped to manage their behaviour and emotions. Feeling you can overcome hardship and guide your own destiny. That part of empowerment and belonging is such an important aspect, especially in our secondaries, where young people, if they're not feeling they have that actually that's where a lot of the problems can happen in terms of behaviours. And it's grounded in cultural traditions around feeling connected and belonging. And those sorts of things are the bits that we can really help with creating those positive experiences and protective factors, developing those for our young people so they do feel more resilient going forward. But of course, all of this isn't really possible if we're pouring from an empty cup. And I know that for many of you, it can feel like that at times. And our window of tolerance is really important. I don't know whether you have all come across this or not. Yes. And so really just want to talk to you a bit about this. And this is a new concept for me as well, coming from education into kind of mental health, the window of tolerance. I think it's a really useful concept for our children, for us. So this is from someone called Dan Siegel. And the idea is that everyone does have a different size window of tolerance, and it can change throughout the day, throughout the year, at different points, depending on our experiences, our childhoods and our backgrounds and various things that we bring with us. We're all aiming to stay within that window of tolerance, which is the middle section there, which allows us to be flexible and grounded, to have conversations with people, to feel empathy, to be able to regulate ourselves and be present and really in the moment. Where we struggle, which happens quite often and can happen, maybe it's happened for you guys today when you didn't get your cup of coffee, or you're on an extra playground duty, or trying to have your lunch, or you wanted to attend the webinar and you couldn't, or you could. There's always things, aren't there, that can push us up and down within our window of tolerance. but sometimes out of that window of tolerance. And if we're pushed up into hyper arousal, that's going to be more where we'll be more anxious, more angry, we might feel overwhelmed, fight, flight. Hypervigilant is another one that can definitely happen. Or the opposite effect of hyperarousal, where we just shut down, or where a young person might shut down. A young person who got the head on the desk, got the headphones on, got the hat over their head, doesn't want to talk, doesn't want to have a conversation, very withdrawn, or just disinterested. That often is a symptom of what that might be happening. So in order for us to kind of stay within our window of tolerance, and we're going to talk a little bit more later about specific strategies, if we are in hyper arousal, our idea is to bring us down, to down regulate. And this is for ourselves and for young people. I used to find often, if I was in a classroom in a noisy class, I'd try and get all of us to do this. So, right, we're all going to take a minute and just breathe for 10 seconds. So those sorts of activities where you're kind of bringing yourself down, or bringing a situation down where it's got very heightened. Actually, the idea is that you're trying to bring it down from the hyperarousal back into a window of tolerance where thinking and talking can happen in a much better way. And you feel more grounded. If a young person or yourself gone more into the hyperarousal, then actually getting yourself active is going to help more to kind of push yourself back up into that window of tolerance.
So we're going to switch away from window of tolerance for just a second, and thinking about how we can identify when things aren't going well for our young people, and this might be for ourselves as well. But particularly thinking about anxiety and low mood and what that might look or feel like. So what is anxiety? We all feel anxious from time to time. Anxious is an emotion that is kind of just as important as other emotions. It is actually kind of a biological emotion that we feel in response to a perceived danger or threat. However, anxiety becomes problematic when we see the threat as severe and our ability to cope as small. So if you think kind of back to cavemen days, you kind of saw a lion, you kind of get anxious and you're trying to think of your fight, flight, freeze. I'm going to fight this lion, and I'm going to freeze and kind of play dead, or I'm going to flight and try and run away as fast as I can. But kind of in modern day, we don't often come across many kind of lions, but we might perceive an exam as the same kind of reaction as a lion. And so you can see there on the balance that's tipped the scales that actually this is definitely going to happen. I'm definitely going to fail this exam, and it's going to be the worst day of my life, and I can't cope. And actually what we want to do with our young people especially is to level out that balancing scale, build up that ability to cope, and kind of be a bit more realistic about the likelihood or severity of that thing that's causing us anxiety. So like I said before, everyone feels anxious from time to time, and actually anxiety can be a really good thing that can help motivate and help our performance, especially kind of when maybe a run up to a deadline, we might kind of have a bit more energy to try and get something done. As you can kind of see from this scale, if we have low pressure, we're kind of more bored, we're not going to actually do much, and when we have a bit of pressure, we kind of get into that stretch zone, and then we need to monitor it. If we get too much pressure, that's when we're going to strain and the burnout. So it's how do we kind of keep it in that sweet spot. And some people will need some support working out the difference between kind of feeling anxious, kind of a normal emotion, versus kind of having problematic anxiety, where they're kind of maybe interpreting situations as kind of more dangerous or more threatening than they might be in real life. So what anxiety might look like, it might look like avoidance of people, places. You might have some young people that don't go to particular lessons, or find it really hard to get into school, or kind of maybe struggle around kind of break times, lunch times with lots of other people there. They might need lots of reassurance. This might be for kind of their schoolwork. It might be reassurance that they can do something, or that they've got something right. And they might find it hard to relax or sit still in class, and that can be quite fidgety. Might be quite nervous, which you might kind of see in kind of their body language, or the way that they speak in class, or they kind of don't want to speak in class. They might be withdrawn. It might be kind of a change that you notice, that they're not hanging around with the same people. You might kind of notice them being by themselves a lot more. You might also find them being quite irritable. You might ask them something that might be quite snappy, and you kind of show a bit more challenging behaviour. They might present with kind of more psychosomatic things, so kind of having headaches and stomach aches. Maybe you notice more school absence because of these things, and finding it hard to concentrate, or kind of saying that they've got a heart racing or palpitations, kind of feeling very hot, sweaty, those sorts of things. And then the other side is kind of low mood and depression. Often anxiety and low mood kind of go kind of hand in hand, but they can be felt kind of separately as well. So a general low mood, again, it's kind of normal for us to kind of feel sad sometimes, kind of feel low, especially when the kind of the seasons change and kind of having less energy, but kind of a general low mood, like the sadness, wanting to isolate yourself, feeling worried or tired, low self-esteem or confidence, being frustrated or angry. And however, low mood will tend to lift after a few days or weeks. And if it doesn't go away in a couple of weeks, that can be a sign of depression. There's also some things on the left-hand side which could be other signs. So things like changes in weight, changes in sleeping patterns, finding it hard to make decisions, kind of maybe having thoughts about death or suicide. Things like that might be kind of a factor in this as well. But we're going to just share this with you so you kind of know what the signs to spot out for your young people and for yourselves.
And I suppose the thing is that we spot these signs, but it's not always clear what we do with that as well. So I think it's also being aware of who you would go to in school if you do spot these signs in young people, or even around colleagues yourselves, and what you spot there, and what you might be able to do to support yourself and support them going forward, which is what we'll go on to a little bit as well. Thinking about the strategies that we can do to help support yourselves and young people. All of these strategies that we're talking about are for us as well as the young people that we're working with and families. So it's just remembering, first of all, our window of tolerance, going back to that again and remembering and thinking a little bit around our aim is really how can we keep ourselves as much as possible within that window of tolerance. It doesn't mean we have ups and downs, as Caroline was saying. We can sometimes have downs and not feel great, but actually it's where they're really sticking around for a long time that they might be becoming an issue, or when we're going into a real hyper arousal and certain behaviours or things are happening for our young people or ourselves that really we feel actually this needs to change. It's not helpful, doesn't help us move forward. It's not showing a level of resilience that we really need to start to build or continue to build. So we're going to have a look at some strategies around how we kind of do that. So we've got our 6 different tenets here of well-being. We're going to have a little look through some of these things. Probably most of them will feel very, very familiar and we'll think, oh, yes, I know that. And what I would say also is it's not right, go out and do all of these straight away. It might be that we look at some of that and we think, oh, do you know what? I think we could really focus a little bit on this, or I could focus on that. Or maybe if you're with a young person, getting them to have a look at this and say, what area do you think would really help you right now to help you feel a little bit better? So it's really kind of thinking about how you can use these strategies, not to throw everything at it, but target them at the right people at the right time, including the staff that you're working with and the families and the young people. So we're going to just go through a few of those with you, just as reminders, which you probably all know already. So sleep, so incredibly important and sometimes quite an elusive thing for all of us when there's a lot of stress around. But thinking about sleep for you and advice to families you could give is trying to prioritise it, sleeping and resting. So that might be, if you have children yourself or families do, setting those boundaries around that and trying to create enough space for them to have enough rest and for yourselves to have enough rest. Sometimes in our busy lives we don't manage to do that, and actually if we don't allow the kind of window between stopping things, that wind down routine, to help us get in the right zone so that we can sleep, it's very difficult. And if we can't do that for ourselves, then our children, young people don't necessarily know that either. So it's partly building that for yourself, but also as a model then for the young people. Screen use is such a classic one, isn't it? And can be really difficult, but maybe having phones outside of the room, if you know that that does directly affect you, or looking at different ways of using your screens at different times so that it's not before bed, which I know you know already, but just to be aware of.
Yeah. And then for our children and young people, the NHS recommends between 9 to 12 hours of sleep for children aged between 6 and 12. Obviously, every child is slightly different and might need a bit more, a bit less. But things to think about is kind of the consistency with bedtime and routines. Kind of it can be really helpful to have a same kind of pattern of what happens before bed. Like, do you have dinner first and then you have kind of a shower or bath and then you have a story and then bed, but kind of having that same pattern. Maybe the times might be slightly different between kind of a weekday and weekend, but having that consistency helps the body to kind of know, oh, I'm starting my bedtime routine or I'm starting my morning routine. It can also be helpful maybe kind of thinking about what can a child do the night before to help them get ready for school the next day, particularly our teenagers, but thinking about things like packing their bag the night before, laying their uniform out the night before, all those sorts of things might help them sleep better if they've got a set routine. Thinking about limiting that screen time before sleeping where possible. Thinking about, can you get them an alarm clock separate from their phone, trying to have that separation. But also thinking about what helps your child to sleep. Some people kind of like complete darkness, and some others like having some noise on the background, an audio book. Some people need a nightlight on, but just thinking about kind of what works and what works best, and have those consistent routines in place.
And again, I think it's, if you're working with young people, working out if sleep is a big issue for them, where they say, oh, I don't get to sleep till 1, 2 in the morning, or whatever it is, that actually it's for those young people that struggle with that in particular, that might be a good targeted little kind of approach to take with them around what might support them, and for yourselves. Eating well, we know this is a really important one, but just a reminder on this as well. It's so tempting, isn't it, when we're exhausted, when children are exhausted, young people are exhausted, to kind of eat all those comfort foods. But obviously there are NHS guidelines on that, and just so it's just a reminder that the food actually does have a massive effect on our mental health and well-being as well, in terms of how our body's functioning and how we're functioning overall. And just a little reminder. Exercise is another one, which again has to, I think really it's such a personal thing, isn't it, working out what works for you. So the NHS does recommend 150 minutes of exercise a week, which is tricky. Sometimes I imagine, but if you are in school, I think sometimes we do laps of the building, don't we? I remember getting my steps in a lot when I was in the building itself, but also finding those times, if you can leave the building, to have like a little walk in between or at the end of a day, and trying to make sure that there is some exercise built in so that it helps with your mental health and well-being, because obviously your physical and mental health are really linked.
Yeah, and then for children, the NHS recommends 60 minutes of exercise a day. This should include a balance of aerobic and strengthening exercises, but kind of, again, to caveat that these are rough guidelines. There is no one size fits all for exercise, and kind of everybody's different. The mobility is different, and kind of thinking about kind of what works for you and your body. But just thinking about in a school environment, how can we make exercise a fun opportunity for all in and out of school? And same for yourselves, kind of the idea of going on a run might kind of fill you with dread, but what can you do? Do you like going for a walk with a friend and having a talk? Could you kind of, do you like doing a class? There's lots of kind of great YouTube videos that are kind of freely available that you can kind of dance along to, or kind of do something that kind of aligns with things that you enjoy, but also kind of motivating that with our young people. Because we can often spend a lot of time kind of sitting at desks, looking at laptops. I know I spend a lot of time looking at screens, and reminding myself to have those brain breaks and moving my body is really important.
And I think it is finally the one that works for you, isn't it? As Caroline says, everyone's got their different things that work for them. So just because someone loves running doesn't mean it's going to be right for you necessarily. So it's working out what works for you and what you can build into your routine, otherwise, and that's realistic, isn't it? Again, it's realistic kind of targets for yourself or for young people that you're working with, so that it feels achievable. Otherwise you set yourself up to fail, isn't it, if you say you're going to go to the gym every day after a week from now. So it is those realistic targets as well, and that otherwise it just adds to the negativity. So it's keeping it positive and fun things, fun exercise. Learning. So this is a really nice one, actually, though, I think, in terms of making time for your own hobbies and interests, and maybe that might be with your own young people or with young people in school, finding things where you can new skills to learn. I think sometimes when you're locked into school days and they're so long, it can be so hard to find those extra things to kind of keep your brain going. But actually those sort of enriching activities are so important, aren't they, for us, in terms of connecting to other people, connecting to a new skills, still feeling like we're learning and building resilience. And it also acts as a really good role model to children, young people. They always love, don't they, hearing what you've done. If you've done something interesting, or you make something, or you do something, children, young people like to hear that. So it's good for you and for the families around you in that way.
Yeah. And then for children and young people, it's kind of encouraging conversation about out school hobbies and activities. I know there's lots of kind of after school clubs and things like that you might want to encourage young people to go to, or clubs around kind of break time and lunch times, for thinking about kind of ways that they can learn about their interests through extracurricular activities, making them a whole kind of family thing, but kind of really keeping those brains active outside of the school.
Well, I know in primary schools as well, there's opportunities, isn't there? Sometimes when you're running after school clubs, and sometimes it's quite nice to do something that you really enjoy doing, and to do that with the children or young people, and it kind of starts a whole kind of other sort of conversation and learning with them, which is really important, isn't it? We get very locked into the academics of everything, which is important, but actually that learning is on lots of different levels, isn't it, in terms of lots of new skills. So I think it's a really nice one, actually, in terms of well-being, this one, and very kind of educationally aligned as well, learning new skills, isn't it? Keeping calm. I mean, this is a hard one, isn't it, at times when there's such a lot going on. But I suppose it's thinking again about that behaviour iceberg model, thinking about our window of tolerance, thinking about when we are just showing people our behaviours and we're not engaging with how we're feeling and sharing that with others in a way that's going to help us. Actually, it makes it very difficult for people to connect. And we've got to think about how we're modelling to children how they should be expressing and managing their emotions, which I know you all know that's what you'll be telling families all the time, when we're stuck in the moment, and can be really hard. And we're going to talk again a few different strategies that we can think of, which again, a lot of this you will know. I wouldn't think any of this is new to you guys. It's just more to have it in your mind and to try and do the things that you know might help yourself, which can be really hard, I know, to find that time in your day. Yes.
Yeah, the same for children. So there's lots of different pictures along the bottom there, but working with your students to identify regulation strategies that help them feel calm. So it might be stretching, going on a walk, maybe just need some time out of the classroom, doing some sort of physical activity, just counting their fingers or kind of pressing fingertips, focusing on their breathing, using like a fidget toy, squishing some Play-Doh, some blue tack, having a step outside, having a drink of water, hug with a friend, splashing their face with water, kind of just sitting down with kind of some headphones on. Maybe you've got a safe space or quiet area in your school that young people can go to. They're going to have that break. But for everyone, it's different. There's no one size fits all for any of us. And so there's lots of different things to kind of think about to see what works.
And I think the thing is with that, if you do find that for young people, something that works for them actually acts as a preventative tool, doesn't it? So we're trying to stop them from going outside their window tolerance, and actually the more we can kind of tap into what that might be for them and encourage them to use that as a strategy, it helps them feel more resilient and more in control of what they're doing, and it also prevents other things happening, doesn't it? So I know sometimes it feels like I haven't got the time to find out what would work for this young person, but actually it might save you a lot of time and a lot of upset all round if you're able to help them find those strategies that might help them keep calm, and sharing the ones that work for you, really important.
Yeah, so here's some kind of more examples of mindfulness, breathing exercises, grounding techniques and imagery, relaxation. All of these can help down regulate. So you've got another person there indicating kind of just moving your body. Sometimes we hold a lot of stress and tension in our jaws. We kind of clench. We may kind of have our shoulders really tight. We might clench our fists. You kind of might be actually noticing how your body feels now to kind of take a moment to kind of shake, relax, uncross your legs, wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, kind of shrug your shoulders, kind of just move your body a little bit and actually kind of release some of that tension. That lovely little beach palm tree image is kind of there for an imagery, kind of relaxation, kind of thinking about kind of closing your eyes, engaging with the senses, thinking of kind of a safe space or a place that you would like to be, kind of thinking about your 5 senses, kind of what you might hear, feel, kind of touch, smell, all those sorts of things. The 5 senses one on the bottom left there is something that you can do kind of without having to think about a different place, but in the space that you're in, looking around kind of what 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, 1 thing that you can taste, and just thinking about that, helping to kind of maybe it's when our thoughts are running away with us, helping us to kind of ground in the here and now and kind of be present. And that helps your kind of brain think of something other than kind of maybe what you're worrying about. Box breathing, using kind of a square or kind of maybe something that's rectangular, but going around the outside of the breathing, kind of holding for 4 seconds, inhaling, holding, exhaling, kind of going around that shape. Some people do it as another inhale, hold, breathe out, hold, but you can hold it for 4, but kind of the symmetry of the breathing. There, that picture of that kind of bedroom or a safe space there, again, thinking about kind of having that safe space at home or in school, thinking about where you can go to kind of help kind of relax. And the other one there is the hot chocolate breathing. So kind of imagine you've got a cup of hot chocolate or a tea or a coffee, whatever you might like to drink, and kind of when you're blowing it out, kind of cooling it down, and then breathing in, imagining the smell of the hot chocolate or whatever it kind of is that you like to drink. But these are kind of examples that we can kind of model with a young person. We can use it to co-regulate, to kind of promote them being able to self-regulate.
And actually, I find these are very useful. If there's a young person who's struggling, when you do it with them, it's actually really lovely for yourself and actually really helps them as well. So I think also, I'm just thinking those of you who are here during a lunch break and whatever else, finding literally those 2-3 minutes for yourselves to just sit and take one of these to kind of help keep yourself within that kind of calm zone to carry on dealing with the different things that I'm sure are very complicated. I know very complicated within school. It's such an important thing, isn't it? Because then we're able to kind of feel that we can engage with everyone in a way that we're kind of happy with. I know there's times where I felt that if I'm not quite in my window of tolerance and I've had to then go deal with a difficult parent or a child in a particular situation, actually I just need that minute to just make sure I'm in the right place, so I'm going to then interact in the best way and therefore get the best outcomes. Otherwise sometimes things happen that you just aren't very happy with, and we prefer to have done things in a different way. So it's these sorts of techniques are really nice for us as well, to help us take that moment to think and then kind of work out what we want to do going forward. So just a little reminder of that. Socializing, this connection part I think is such an important one as well. So making that time for you and for our young people to make sure they are socializing. Sometimes they do take themselves away or withdraw. And it's not to say you don't need your own space at times, of course, that's absolutely true, but actually knowing who you can go to if you do need support, what that might look like, and how to connect with others, and for our young people as well, especially.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about how can we encourage students to socialise with other children after school. It might be really hard if they maybe struggle with friendships inside of school, kind of promoting when they can spend that time together, but kind of thinking about the ways that they connect. And lots of our young people connect now online, and thinking about the ways that they can do that safely. But then also socialising is kind of part of maybe encouraging families to spend time together. I know it can be really hard when we're working, we've got so much on our plate, but kind of just thinking about that time that we get to kind of sit down and spend time together. Some people might sit down for like meal times, or kind of watch a movie together, or kind of play a board game or read a book together. But just thinking about those small pockets of special time that we get to spend with one another. And it's the same with us and our peers in a working capacity as well. Kind of when do we have that time to kind of just connect and talk about something that's not work related or things like that, and can be really important for us.
And again, like Caroline says, it's kind of the smart target bit again. It's not we've got to spend all the time together all the time, but actually finding those pockets of saying, hey, do you know what, tonight we're going to make sure, we are going to sit down and watch that episode of something and have a chat about what we like about it, or we're going to read a book together, or we're going to do something that we know, play that game together, whatever it is. Those little pockets actually can really count for a lot of the quality of the time. Obviously, is really important. It doesn't have to be for hours and hours every single day. So it's kind of working out what feels manageable and what's most important to you as a family, and for the young people that you're working with, and the suggestions that you can do to support parents around that and families. Okay, I mean, this one we put in because we think it's so important to recognise really what it's like in schools and education at the moment. I mean, it always has been, but I think particularly so with resources, and it feels like, I know a lot of our colleagues are feeling like every day there's a new hat put on them. Can you be this person? Can you be that person? There's obviously this time of year and there's a lot of illness around, so lots of you might be having to stand in for different people in different absences, and it's kind of trying to look after yourself within that is really hard, isn't it? It's very demanding at times, and I suppose it's trying to recognise signs of when you are feeling exhausted or burnt out, and what you can kind of do to help yourself with that. So obviously we've looked at those strategies, we've talked about a lot of those things which could fit in here, but I suppose it's also being in touch with ourselves enough to know when we might be on the edge of that, so that we can then kind of get the support that we need. So physically it might come across feeling totally exhausted with headaches and pain in your body, or becoming ill quite frequently. Emotionally, you might be feeling quite overwhelmed, or have some negative thoughts or self-doubt, which you've kind of noticed you wouldn't necessarily have had before. And you might be more irritable or procrastinating with certain things, or finding it much harder to concentrate. I think it's just important, because we're so good at kind of spotting things in other people at times as teachers, but actually sometimes noticing it in ourselves, and noticing the little signs before it gets to a problem, and then working out where we can go for support and how to do that, which is what our next few slides are about in terms of signposting for you guys. If it does feel like at times it's a little bit tricky, there's huge amounts of support out there, not just in the building you're in, but around you in terms of Southwark, in terms of the services like we offer, and in terms of lots of things around. Also some very good apps, which Caroline's going to talk us through a little bit as well.
A couple here that are all kind of NHS recommended as well. We kind of talk about them a lot with kind of our young people and family. So you've got Calm Harm there in the top left. This is one that we recommend a lot for those who might kind of be struggling with self-harm, but it is actually applicable to everyone. It has lots of strategies in place that kind of, when you're kind of feeling the urge, it will kind of give you some different strategies to try out, and over time it kind of learns an algorithm of kind of sort of strategy that you find helpful, and it will suggest more of those. But there's kind of a real plethora of helpful strategies on there that you can kind of try out, and whether someone is experiencing kind of thoughts of self-harm or not. The How We Feel app is one that's kind of really helpful to help kind of that early stages of being able to identify and label your emotions. Even as a therapist myself, I struggle to kind of actually label how I'm feeling, and How We Feel kind of helps you to kind of put words to kind of physical sensation, kind of journaling how you feel and kind of noticing patterns. Calm in the top right there is a mindfulness app that's got videos, it's kind of got sound bites, but kind of just to help to have that moment of calm. And the Happify app is games and activities that are kind of science driven, to kind of help reduce stress. So kind of having a go at a game that actually helps to rewire your brain and make you feel a bit less stressed afterwards, which I think is good to give it a go. But these are all suitable for young people and adults alike, and are all free to use. And this other one here is kind of one on staff wellbeing that we'd recommend. So these, again, some of these, like Headspace is an external app. Headspace is also, if you have Netflix, they also have a TV series on sleep and mindfulness, if you kind of want to kind of absorb information that way. You've got Unmind, which is a mental health platform for mental health wellbeing. Work Life Central, Live Well, Talking Therapies, EAP, which is an employee assistance program, which will be different per maybe kind of school or federation, but kind of things to look into actually if you think I would like a bit further support, or I know someone who might need support, and please do kind of just reach out and have a look at any of these sorts of things.
I know that Emma wanted us to make sure that you're aware of this. Emma, I don't know whether you wanted to say something specifically about this, but this is an education supports website that you can have access to as well. And I think it's support directly for you or for staff that might be experiencing any kind of difficulty. So there are lots of things around there to help support. So please do access those services if that would be helpful. Now we are going to finish there, but there might be some questions. We've got some feedback. We'd really appreciate any feedback from you guys about how you found the session. Any questions? We've still got a bit of time by the looks of it. We've got nine minutes. If there's any questions, thoughts, or immediate feedback about the session or anything else. I mean, obviously we do deliver in lots of different schools around lots of different types of training. So if this was something that you'd want more staff to hear about, or you'd like us to come and do some more specific training around or support within staff wellbeing, we're very happy to do that as well. So if you do access on our feedback form, you could always make that suggestion or get in touch with us as well, whether you are a school that works with us, the school engagement team, or part of the mental health support team. That is our feedback, and I think Caroline's put that in the chat. And Emma's also asked us to share the feedback for Southwark as well, because this is a joint initiative with Emma, Southwark Safeguarding, lead with us, which is really lovely as well. So we are trying to get a more joined up approach, so that we're trying to give schools exactly what they need when they need it. But we don't know that for sure unless you let us know. Actually, yes, this was good. No, it wasn't good. Actually, we'd like more of this or less of that, or in a slightly different way. So please do feedback and let us know how you found that today. And the final one is, if there are any questions, please do feel free to turn off your mics, or turn them on, even turn your windows on. Should I stop sharing as well, potentially, for the last few minutes?
I'll put our email in the chat as well if anyone wants to email us a question separately. Please feel free to do so.
So yes, do get in touch with us. If there are any questions, feel free to ask, or as Caroline said, let us know through feedback or by emailing us to get in touch. Thanks everyone for your time, appreciate it. No, it's busy lunch times.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susie and Caroline. It was really, really useful. I think what really struck me is understanding the way that trauma can manifest. So sometimes we might see young people present in what seems like a confusing way in quite a kind of neutral setting, but understanding that is because of how their brain has been kind of wired by trauma. So we might pay a lot of attention to when there's what we can understand to be a difficult situation, and we might not pay that same level of attention to things that seem like easy everyday situations, but for our young people those might be the hardest situations. So really good to kind of challenge ourselves to think differently about how young people might experience things, and really helpful to have those strategies as well. I think it's so interesting that whether you are an adult, a professional, someone working in school, or a young person, mental health can kind of all boil down to the same things, and those strategies are useful for anyone, and they will be different for different people. So that was really useful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
As he says, we do have a couple of minutes, so if anyone would like to take themselves off mute or pop a question in the chat, we have a little bit of time while people are maybe thinking of their questions or queries. This session has been recorded, so you are able to access this to recap anything that's been covered or to share it with your wider school staff teams. All of our other webinar recordings are also available on the Southwark Education website, so I'll pop those in the chat so you know where to go to access this one as well.
I'm just sort of noticing from David, sorry, I don't know if it's David James or James David, apologies if I'm getting it the wrong way around. that managing staff mental health and well-being is such a major one, isn't it? And it's such a tough one, because it's the kind of when we're teaching, we're in teacher mode, aren't we? And we're very much kind of looking after those other people in the building, but actually it is how we all try and look after each other within that, so that we feel supported, and spotting those signs for each other as well, and kind of going, hey, do you want to have a, you know, what about if you take 2 minutes now and I'll take 2 minutes later, or whatever it is, trying to find those ways of helping each other. Yeah, really important. Yeah, it's really been lovely to be here today.
Thank you so much for presenting to us today, and thank you to everyone who has joined. We'll take the silence to mean that everyone is reflecting on all that they've learnt and thinking about
Absolutely.
what they'll be applying for themselves and their school. So I'll end the recording now, and stop the meeting. So thanks again, everyone. And we will see you next time.
Thank you, Sam.